Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. Well, we've got some interesting news. The Benitez case out of California has morphed into another one. They have basically allowed them to allow assault weapons. I think I reported a little bit on this last Wednesday. But what's really interesting is that it's in the Ninth Circuit, so that means that they're probably going to start doing some of their shenanigans like they did with the magazine bans that they had in California. If this holds true, and it continues to hold its water, which it should, because the case is 80 pages long, his brief, Benitez actually released to explain his opinion on how he found this case, how he found his way in this case, I should put it that way. It should hold water. It's very well written out, but just like he did last time, he put a 10-day stay on it, meaning that it cannot be, you can't buy assault weapons right now in California unless they're the neutered versions, because they've got 10 days. And what happened with the Ninth Circuit last time with the magazine ban is they started playing a lot of stuff, political stuff, and they brought it before an en banc panel. Now, what an en banc panel does is it allows not just the three people that would normally preside on a case like this, it allowed them to get all of them, that the judges in the Ninth Circuit Court, to go ahead and hear this case, or to say that they will hear this case at some point, which means that they can delay it for a lot longer. The magazine ban stuff has been going on for a long time. If you listen to my last podcast where I talked about it's longer than World War II, it's longer than the Civil War. That's how long this case has been going for the magazine ban in California. Now, that said, what this has the potential to do is so great that it has to be heard by the Supreme Court in the United States. There's no way that any decision that is made for the magazines or for the assault weapons ban doesn't end up in the Supreme Court. Why do I believe that? Because there are so many other states that have used California's laws, basically, to get their own version of these very prohibitive laws in place. And that means that they're going to have to finally settle it once and for all. This is a good thing for the 2A. On that note, let's talk about something else that's more interesting to me. From The Truth About Guns, we have some terrible news for the gun control industry. The CDC, yes, the same CDC that desperately wanted more taxpayer dollars for more gun violence research, is reporting that firearms-related homicides fell in 2022. Now, what's interesting about that is 2022 was one of the largest gun-buying binges in history. It was a 50-month gun-buying binge. So anyone who's into statistics, which I am a little bit, knows that if you have lots of people buying guns and the gun violence goes down, there's a correlation effect here. Why is that? Because people that are stupid, criminals, who don't obey the law anyway, know that if they're going to find a dude with a gun, they're not going to perpetrate that crime, simply put. That is what happens. This has been shown time and time again throughout history in the United States. Everywhere that they've had a crime problem and they mandated people carry firearms or mandated people have one as the head of household, you've seen corresponding crime rates decrease. Violent crime rates decrease. Why? Again, it doesn't take a rocket scientist. Any one of us who is in the 2A knows this. You know, I often tell you, stay strapped or get clapped. This is 100% proof of that. I don't know how else we could be more apparent, but, you know, when you have people that are siding on the side of Hamas who would be killed by Hamas because they run against everything Hamas stands for, meaning the gay, lesbian groups, any of those guys that are siding with Hamas, don't really understand something. That anything you're trying to do for Hamas, they don't reciprocate that. They don't reciprocate your feelings. They don't care about you. They never have. You run counter to everything that they exist for. And that means that your virtue signaling isn't going to work. This same line of thought needs to be carried out here. That your feelings don't care about facts, and facts don't care about your feelings. But the fact is, facts matter more than feelings. Period. That's always been the case. When anytime we've had to have those debates about gun laws, where we actually have real debates where we're actually talking about the problem and not actually ruling off of our feelings at the time, we usually come to some sort of middle road. Well, we've given away enough of our middle road, and we are now at that point where we're suffering a death from 1,000 cuts when it comes to the 2A, and it's time to fight back. And that's what's happening. Groups like Gun Owners of America, Firearms Policy Coalition, these guys are going after the throat of the federal government saying you can't do this. And they're winning. It's just going to take time. In that same vein, something that's more concerning to me, or just as concerning, anyone who knows, who has been in the YouTube space, the gun tuber space, likes guns, probably knows who Larry Vickers is. Well, Larry Vickers has now pleaded guilty to conspiracy to illegally acquire machine guns. Now, what this is he and some other associates got together and they were trying to import guns, fully automatic guns, in the guise of, for law enforcement agencies. What turns out was happening is they were keeping them for their own collections. So in the NFA, there's this one little weird rule in the SOT stuff that says if you bring a gun into the United States and it's fully automatic, that's the only way you can get modern or newer guns into the United States is to do this. They have to be sold to a police department right away, pretty close to right away after they've tested it and decided that they're going to purchase it. Well, these sample guns were never sold to law enforcement. And the ATF got involved and found Mr. Vickers, who's just been through cancer and a ton of other stuff, who is a big Second Amendment advocate, and he is also a big gun historian. He's also one of the pioneers of the training groups in the United States that actually started training people to be defensive and using firearms, to be good Second Amendment people. So that's sad to me, that they're lacing up Larry Vickers with the only way they possibly can, especially after he just went through cancer stuff, but it makes sense that the federal government would go after him at probably one of the weakest times possible. And he pleaded guilty so he doesn't rot into prison. He'll end up with some sort of probation. He'll end up with fines, but hopefully he doesn't end up on the inside of a prison cell. Unlike CRS. CRS, that poor guy, all he did was talk about the little auto key card, and he's now in prison for an undetermined time now because of something so trivial as poking the bear, so to speak. Because that's how I see what happened with CRS, is that guy just poked the bear and was advertising something that was tongue-in-cheek, and the ATF didn't like it. The same type of thing can be said about Larry Vickers. Larry Vickers is a huge person in the 2A world. So to go after someone like him, they're telling all of us, you better watch out, we're coming for you. I personally am of the volition he did nothing wrong, but that's me. The letter of the law does say that if you do have a fully automatic weapon, you have to have one that was made before 1986, and you have to have the paperwork to go along with that. So any modern fully automatic weapons, even for someone who was an ex-SEAL, even for someone who was, I believe, was even ex-law enforcement, even for someone who trains law enforcement, that's not acceptable to the ATF. In my parlance, it makes perfect sense that someone who's trained these people, someone who's an advocate of this, someone who is a expert in the field by many definitions, should have access to these firearms just like everyone else should. Because the Second Amendment didn't stop by saying, hey, we meant also no fully automatics. When it was incepted, the Second Amendment was decided to give us the same parity. That means the same advantages that the military of the time currently had. Fast forward to where we are now, that does in fact mean tanks, that does in fact mean nukes, that means everything that's on the table. But our government seems to steal that power from us because we've let them. Now's when we stand up and say, no, we're done. Fully automatics I've shot them at places like Battlefield Las Vegas where it was legal to shoot them. I've shot them with people that have SOTs or have a license to have said weapon, meaning they paid the tax and everything else, and they can stand there and let you shoot one magazine through it. I've shot these guns. What I've learned, they're fun. They're absolutely fun. Would I want one? I think I'd want an MP5, to be honest, if I could actually do it. But the reason why I want one is because it's cool. The practicality of it, if you've actually done any of these shooting drills or you've done a lot of the training, you realize that multiple rounds fired at target or around target isn't so much to improve hit probability, it's more so to keep heads down. And that's what should still be allowed, but it's not. My concern, being a civilian who doesn't have access to endless capital and endless logistics like the American industrial military complex, I don't have the means to feed said weapon. I don't have the means to feed any of the parts that would break over time using said weapon. But I believe I absolutely should be able to do that if I have the financial means to do it. Why? Because it leaves me on the same parity or the same footing as the American government. The American government right now has a monopoly on violence that shouldn't exist. A lot of people have said the escalation that's happened on the streets, the gang violence, them getting illegal weapons because, well, again, criminals don't care, was to allowed sheriff's departments, law enforcement agencies to get weapons from the federal government, like MRAPs. That's an armored car, basically. You're also seeing them with Mark 19 grenade launchers that they supposedly neutered so that they can shoot tear gas. What's more surprising is I've seen MRAPs running around with 240 Bravos. If you don't know what a 240 Bravo is, that's a 308 belt-fed machine gun, or more aptly, it's a 7.62 by 51 belt-fed machine gun. And while I understand that law enforcement does come under some very extreme circumstances nowadays because criminals get more violent all the time, I don't believe it is in the American people's best interest to give them that big of a disparity against a normal person. They don't come up against it often enough for them to all have it. And they've been able to buy them routinely off of military surplus auctions and get them at a song where we are not allowed to have said weapon. And in the areas where we're going to now, after, my eyes opened after COVID, seeing where the oppression is actually going to come from, it's going to come from local law enforcement more so than it is going to be from the federal law enforcement. Being able to stop them. Can you stop them? Absolutely. What do I mean by that? There isn't one time in the last, since the 60s, that America has went up against a foe armed with just normal weapons that they've won. And when I say won, I mean won decisively. If you look at Vietnam, we didn't win. As hard as that is to say, we wasted a lot of American people, 56,000, 58,000, something like that, to fight communism. Did it stop the spread of communism? Sort of. But its end goal didn't actually achieve what it was meant to be. Fast forward to the next round of wars. We ended up in Afghanistan, or we ended up in Iraq. It was a very lopsided, one-sided war. We ended up then fighting the Iraqis for 20 years, and it's still going on. And we still haven't won that war. Fast forward when we went to Afghanistan to go after bin Laden. We didn't win there either. We ended up pulling out of our troops. People with AK-47s and flip-flops have done more damage to the American military-industrial complex than anyone else has. Okay, you can win. You're just going to have to use asymmetric warfare, and you're going to have to use tactics that the American military doesn't use. It would be horrible for such tactics to happen in the United States, but as they keep oppressing people, I can see that becoming more and more of a reality given time, especially if people don't feel like their voices are being heard. We stand on the precipice of World War III. And as often as I like to give you guys white pills and try to show you that the world isn't coming to an end, I still don't believe that. But I also believe to look at the reality of the situation. We have now sent 2 carrier battle groups, a Marine Expeditionary Force and a carrier battle group that has the military might between the two to overthrow a country. And we put them in the Mediterranean to hopefully stop what's going on in Gaza from spreading. At the same time, all it takes is the wrong person in control at any given time, and that could go sideways and we could enter in a war right now. At the same time, as China is weak right now, and we are weaker than we'd like to think we are, it would make sense that if we've deployed one of our 2 of our carrier battle groups, that they see a very opportune time to strike Taiwan. Now, what would that do to the United States? We would basically be embroiled in World War III. We already are, if this is World War III. If this is the shot that was, fired and heard around the world, we already are embroiled in it. We're already giving resources to Israel. We're already giving resources to Ukraine. We're already giving resources to Taiwan. The only thing we're not doing yet, at least not publicly, is pushing the buttons and actually using the weapons. And it doesn't take a large leap mentally to realize that that's not very far from where we're headed. All these people that are so pro-war right now are from Generation Z. I don't think they understand what it means to go to war and that they are the people that will be fighting the war. They will institute a draft, and the first ones they draft are that Generation Z and the Generation Alpha. Every one of us who are Generation X, and even the Boomer generation, we're too old now to fight. They're going to make you fight. So you advocating for war instead of peace is just putting yourself on the line. And we now have the potential to lose an entire generation because they're actually allowing males and females to be drafted, is what it sounds like. And that means we could lose an entire generation of our youth on a war that doesn't matter to Americans. That's sad. That's heartbreaking. We have our own cultural war issues here that we need to deal with because there's a lot here that we are fighting over that in reality doesn't matter when it comes to being an American. Joe Biden went to Israel, so did Kamala Harris. What would have happened if Hamas actually took them out? There's a lot of Americans that taking out our president would be a rallying cry for war. And I'm not so sure that they're wrong, because striking American presidents is something that has never been done, at least by foreign people. Our one assassination or 2 assassinations, the Lincoln one and then JFK, were perpetrated by one dude who was pissed off about the South. And then if you look at the JFK stuff, officially it was done by one dude. Unofficially, because they still won't release everything else, it could have been pulled off by the CIA. I'm more of leaning towards the CIA would have done it, because JFK would have kept us out of Vietnam. And the American military-industrial complex, they're going to do what they do. And if it means money, they're going to do whatever they can to get into the war. That's what I'm fearful of right now. This Lake City Arms stuff, where their munitions factory, owned by Winchester, them not willing to sell ammunition to civilians. It says that our military is gearing up for war in one way or another, whether we're supporting it or we're actually going to be fighting it. I'd like to think that they're gearing up with the 6.8 and that's what they're changing their tooling for, but the reality, the hard, cold reality is the 5.56 is still in play for most of those NATO countries that we would be supporting, as well as ourselves. And you have to look at the economic situations that would lead you to understand that we are leading towards war, whether we want it or not. The American might that we once had isn't what we have now. There was a point in time we guaranteed trade on the oceans. After World War II, we did that with Bretton Woods. We no longer have the forces we once did. We have built country smashers with carrier battle groups instead of destroyer groups to patrol the ocean. Trade keeps people free. Trade keeps people peaceful. And if we can't keep that happening, it's not going to take a long leap to think about something bad happening when trade from certain parts of the world gets cut off. You're already seeing the spike in oil prices now. And we're, for all intensive purposes, in the United States, energy independent. It's great for us. What happens to the rest of the world? And yeah, people will bitch and cry about using our grade of oil that we have capable in the United States. But when the trading value of the oil on the deep blue sea for everyone else gets over $200 a barrel, I could see us sticking with what we have and shutting out everyone else from our oil, our production. That doesn't mean we won't send them refined product, but it means that the rest of the world's in for a different world place than where we are. And it's kind of scary. Anyway, I hope you guys had a great weekend. I did. I'm gearing up for my new job. I'm excited about that. I have a physical tomorrow where I have to do a TB test and basically prove that I'm not totally incapable of doing the job, which I should be able to do without any problems. I am going to try to do a couple different things this week a little different. Instead of dropping every day, Monday through Thursday, I think I'm going to try Monday, Wednesday, and possibly Friday to drop an episode, because the statistics are showing that the less often and the longer the podcast seems to do better than if I drop shorter ones closer together. Like, share, subscribe, be great.